start the Zoom.
So let me share my screen. Ladies and gentlemen, and our esteemed panelists, welcome to Nazarbayev University and to the launch of Central Asia Hub of the Peer Network. Our apologies for the delayed start. And my name is Noreen Durrani, and I'm a professor in the Graduate School of Education at Nazarbayev University, along with my colleague, Dr. Ellen Thibault. I lead the Central Asian Hub. Welcome again to the university and to this launch. It gives me great pleasure to reach this moment in a journey that started in February 2019. And I take this opportunity to thank one person in particular who led us on this journey for a year, from the inception of the idea to successfully securing this prestigious £2 million grant from Arts and Humanities Research Council under the Gcrf Global Challenges Research Fund, awarded by the UK Research and Innovation. So I take this opportunity to thank Professor Alan Smith from the beginning. Professor Alan Smith has been holder of the UNESCO Chair in Education at Ulster University. His cutting-edge research led to establishing a $3 million program in education for pluralism, human rights, and democracy at the University of Ulster. Professor Smith has researched the role of education in post-conflict society in a range of countries, including Bosnia, Serbia, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and he has worked for and with the British Council, UNICEF, and the Council of Europe, among others, in recognition of his long-standing contribution to bringing divided societies in Northern Ireland together through integrated schooling. He was conferred upon an OBE by the Queen in December 2019. His leadership led us finally to get this grant in early 2020, amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and reflection upon the purposes of life. Professor Smith decided to leave academia to pursue other important things in life. While we respect his decision, we very much miss him, but we thank him for building a sound foundation from which we can steer the peer network onwards and forwards. So thank you very much, Alan, on behalf of our entire team. Thanks to your leadership. Just a bit about the peer network. The peer network is a 4-year initiative which involves 4 international partners, 2 universities in the UK, Ulster University and the University of Sussex, 1 in Africa, the University of Cape Town, and 1 in Central Asia, Nazarbayev University. And while we have multiple aims, today I want to focus on 2. We aim to improve the quality of political economy analysis of education in Africa and in Central Asia. By political economy analysis, or PEA, we mean better understanding the underlying political, economic, and social reasons why some forms of education may make conflict or social disharmony worse. And today our aim is to share with you the multiple ways that participants and attendees can contribute to the development of the Central Asian Hub. We will be focusing particularly on how we will be commissioning 10 empirical studies focusing on PEA in Central Asia, which is committed to the support of early career researchers. I'll I'll also take this opportunity today to show you one important resource that is already available on the peer network site. So between October and December, under the leadership of Sussex and in conjunction with the United Kingdom Forum on International Education and Training, we produced a lecture series comprising 12 lectures that are freely available and accessible to all on the theme of PEA in context of in times of conflict, pandemics, and crises. Just to give you an idea of the program, today we have 7 panelists, including myself. Our first panelist is Professor Alisami Adesida, who is the provost of Nazarbayev University. He joined us in 2006, and since then, he has been overseeing NU's entire academic and research portfolios. He has been at the helm of developing our strategic vision, as well as implementing it. Before joining NU, Professor Adesida was Provost for Academic Affairs in the University of Illinois. Without further ado, I will offer the platform to Provost Adesida to formally launch the Central Asia Hub. Dear audience, please keep on writing your questions in the chat box. I know it's a long wait for you to listen to us, but I can assure you we will have plenty of opportunities to discuss your questions. The floor is yours, Professor Adesida.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Zakir?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that everybody can hear. Yeah, thank you very much, Nori. Thank you for making this happen. Dear colleagues and dear important guests, dear friends, good evening from Kazakhstan. I'm not sure exactly where everybody is. I say good evening and welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Central Asian Hub of the PEER Network. The PEER stands for Political Economy of Education Research. I can assure you this is the first time I actually learned of that terminology, PEER. As we say in Kazakhstan, Kali Kish, Jene Koshkaldinista. That means welcome, good evening, and welcome to you all. In particular, I would like to welcome our international partners from Ulster University, University of Cape Town, and University of Success. I want to welcome you to Nazarbayev University in Nur-Sultan City in Kazakhstan. We regret that you could not be here physically today on our beautiful campus due to COVID-19 pandemic condition, which is prevailing all over the world. Nevertheless, we do welcome you virtually in this 10th year of our existence as an institution of higher education located in Kazakhstan, in the heart of Central Asia, along the ancient and historical Silk Road. We know very much that funding is an important enabler of most research enterprises. Therefore, on behalf of Nazarbayev University, I would like to thank the agencies that are funding the work of the PEER Network. The Global Challenges Research Fund, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and the UK Research and Innovation. Thank you very much for funding this particular network and for the important work they'll be doing in the near future. The activities that the network and the Central Asian Hub will be conducting are critical to education research in this part of the world and in Africa also. I'm originally from Nigeria. If maybe you heard it from my accent. This is perhaps the first time that an intensive research will be conducted in Central Asia, looking at education reform and how the prevailing circumstances on the ground, be they politics, history, culture, and other factors combine to impact outcomes and the ensuing policies and practices. Some of these factors are sensitive issues. They're sensitive. However, I would like to assure you that the Central Asian Hub will be dutiful in looking at all variables dispassionately. NU was created under special laws by the government of Kazakhstan as an autonomous organization of education. And that means something here. This means that NU has academic freedom and institutional autonomy. The management of NU reports to a board of trustees and not to the Ministry of Education. So therefore, we have been chartered to conduct independent-minded research, and we do have controls over our programs at all levels. The hub of the peer network is centered in a graduate school of education and the School of Humanities, Sciences and Humanities. In particular, the Graduate School of Education is the flagship for us in engaging in the education reform agenda of the nation of Kazakhstan. This is part of our strategic mission for NU, is to lead education reform in the nation. In this domain, the Graduate School of Education has been very, very active. They've been at the forefront of engaging NU with different types of institutions, especially universities in Kazakhstan and across Central Asia. I know they have many joint research on different topics with other Central Asian universities. The latest of which I'm very much aware of is on research ethics and methodologies, which is led by Professor Elaine Chaplin of the Graduate School of Education. So we are already engaged many Central Asian universities. Beyond Central Asia, the Graduate School of Education is also engaged with Cambridge University and the University of Pennsylvania as strategic partners. Other partners of NU, of Nazarbayev University, include University of Wisconsin, University of Pittsburgh, Duke University, Colorado School of Mines, and the National University of Singapore. I'm sure that many of these partners will also like to peer into the work of the peer network. To our international colleagues, we're happy that you've partnered with us. Your work is important to NU and fits squarely the mission of the university. And I'm sure that your work will enhance the reputation of NU and that of your institutions also. So please, when the pandemic is gone or subsides or abates, please visit us. We'll be waiting for you. And I want to thank you again, and I commend you to great discussions and the work that you have on the future of education. Thank you very much, and welcome to this inaugural meeting of the Central Asian Hub of the Peer Network. Thank you. Rahmi.
Thank you very much, Provost Ade. And I understand the pressure on your time, so feel free to stay with us as long as it is possible for you. Ladies and gentlemen, my next speaker is Professor Aydah Sagan Taiwa, the Dean Graduate School of Education. Professor Sagan Taiwa has been pivotal to the educational reforms in Kazakhstan. She has supported the Ministry of Education and Science, the Republic of Kazakhstan, in numerous educational reform projects, but her role in the internationalization of higher education and the transformation of higher education stands out. Thank you very much, Dr. Sagan Taiwa. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Noreen, for such warm words about my role. And thank you, Provost Alisami, for a very high grade A+ for the research activities of our school. Құрметті әріптестер, Қазақстанға, Назарбаев университетке, жоғары білім беру мектебіне қош келдіңіздер. Өкінішке орай, құшағымызды жайып, кампуста күте алмай жатырмыз сіздерді, бірақ Правос айтып кеткендей, барлықтарыңызды осы пандемия біткеннен кейін елімізге шақырып, университетімізге шақырып, ары қарай дискурсты, осы үлкен тақырыпты бір-бірімізбен беттесіп жалғастыруға мен өте қуаныштымын. I'm happy to welcome all participants to this remarkable and historical event, and I am not afraid of this word, why I say historical event. I would like to congratulate my colleagues on implementation of such an important initiative at the Peer Network, and my special appreciation to Professor Norin Durrani for leading the Central Asian Hub. This project is a great asset for Kazakh and Central Asian researchers for conducting political economic analysis. And as we have discussed with Norin so many times, that almost all research on Central Asia we are referring to while conducting our own research are conducted by Western scholars. We have this big polarity, and we say about the West and East, and just we always refer to professors of Columbia University, some British professors, American professors, and some international institutions at the World Bank, OECD, and so on. But I think that this Central Asian Hub will work on building the research capacity of the region, research capacity and capability of the emerging scholars of the Central Asian region. And I am sure that very soon we can see the solid research on the region by the regional scholars. We'll see the names and stars of Kazakh, Uzbek, Tajik, Turkmen, Kyrgyz scholars. And this project will be especially useful for all of us, but especially for emerging scholars, for policymakers also, to build the evidence-based and data-driven educational policies and implementing educational reforms. So we all can take advantage of this great peer network initiative, and I want to thank the peer network partners again and wish you and all of us good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aydah. You have absolutely nailed it right. That is the intention behind the peer network, to give opportunities to scholars within Africa and Central Asia to produce locally grounded research that is of use and relevance to stakeholders and communities on the ground, and that is cognizant of the complexities and power relations on the ground as well. So thank you very much. Our third speaker is Shoni Iles, who is representing the Global Challenges Research Fund. Shoni is a senior investment She's a senior investment manager in the International Development and Area Studies team at the Arts and Humanities Research Council, which is part of the UK Research and Innovation. Shoni leads on the education portfolio for AHRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and is also the Global Challenges Research Fund Challenge Manager for Education. Shoni has a passion for educational research because she has served the sector in numerous roles, including being a teacher. Thank you very much, Shoni, for being with us. Shoni will explain the role of the Global Challenges Research Fund and where the project fits within that. Thanks very much, Shoni. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I believe Helena is going to share my slides.
Yes, I will do that now. Just a
Thank
second.
you.
Okay. So, is it visible?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Thank you for inviting me here to talk today. As already said, my name's Shawnee Isles, and I work for UK Research and Innovation, and we are one of the funders within the UK that are responsible for administering Gcrf funding. So I'd just like to say firstly that AHRC and UKRI are really proud of the investments that we've made within the education portfolio, but more widely the Network Plus scheme as a whole. And it's really, really great to see the projects launching and the hubs launching even in such difficult times. So really, thank you for inviting me. It's great to see. So I'm just going to give a really brief overview of Gcrf and some of its key principles. So the Global Challenges Research Fund is a £1.5 billion fund that supports cutting-edge research to address challenges faced by developing countries. And it's part of the UK's official development assistance. Next slide, please. The fund aims to address themes related to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as you'll be able to see on the slide. And it really aims to maximise the impact of research and innovation to improve lives and opportunities in the developing world. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the fund is organised around 6 thematic portfolios linked to the SDGs that we just saw. So global health, food systems, security, education, resilience to environmental shocks and change, and cities and sustainable infrastructure. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk in a little bit more detail about 4 of the key principles of Gcrf funding. So those are research excellence, ODA compliance, equitable partnerships, and capacity development and impact. So firstly, Gcrf aims to fund projects that meet the highest international standards with research that is likely to advance the field. And that is what we mean by research excellence. Also, in relation to research excellence, it's really important to think about whether or not the research is novel, innovative, and timely. And something else that's really important is an interdisciplinary approach. So by this, we mean different disciplines coming together to tackle a challenge. So really challenge-led research with disciplines not working in silos. The efforts of disciplines combined can have a great impact on tackling challenges. So secondly, the official development assistance. So projects funded under Gcrf do need to be ODA compliant. And Gcrf forms part of the UK's official development assistance commitment. So by ODA compliant, we mean funded activity needs to focus on the outcomes that promote the long-term sustainable growth of countries on the OECD development assistant committee list, which we call the DAC list. Sorry, there are a lot of acronyms. Then thirdly, something that is extremely important is equitable partnerships. So partnerships between the global north and south should be genuinely equitable. And by this, we mean that partnerships should be transparent and based on mutual respect. Partnerships should aim to clearly articulate the equitable distribution of resources, responsibilities, efforts, and benefits. And partnerships should really recognise the different inputs, the different interests and desired outcomes, and should also ensure the ethical sharing and use of data, which is responsive to the identified needs of a society. And finally, impact. So Gcrf funded research should have the potential to deliver a breadth of significant and measurable development impacts. It should take in consideration the in-country context, such as language and cultures, and the local appetite and capacity to implement solutions. Also, when we're thinking about impact, it's also important to consider the issues of gender, equalities, diversity, and inclusion. Those were also really key points. And just finally, projects funded under Gcrf should be sustainable and have a sustainable legacy beyond the end of the award. And for example, with the Network Pluses, this could be done through the partnerships that develop and evolve over the duration of the award. So thank you. Just finally, we are really excited to see this project and the hub launch, and we can't wait to see what is undertaken over the duration of the next 3 years. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shawnee. Ladies and gentlemen, our fourth presenter is Professor Mario Novelli, who is the Peer Network Joint PI. Professor Novelli is a professor in the political economy of education at the University of Sussex, and his work is considered as the foundational work in the area of conflict education and peace building. Professor Novelli does not only give lectures on social justice, but he embodies social justice in practice, and he is an activist intellectual. Alongside his research on education, peace building, and conflict, he also has an interest in the way social movements and trade union organizations have learned to develop new strategies and radical pedagogies to cope with the increasingly globalized nature of power and reproduction in the contemporary world. Professor Novelli will take us briefly into the academic field of PEA, and then he will give us a tour of the learning platform that is being developed under his leadership. Thanks very much, Mario. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Noreen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Noreen, for those very kind words of introduction. And also thank you very much to the University of Nazarbayev, to the Provost, to the Dean. We really appreciate the support that you're giving to this project, and thanks to Shawnee and the GCRF, AHRC, UKRI for funding this project. It's really great to be here today. As already mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed so many dimensions of our work and also threatened the sustainability of many of the practices that we are engaged in. And it's really nice to be able to do this presentation today, which and the Africa launch that we did on Tuesday. A couple of reflections on the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that firstly, one of the things I think it's opened up to us is the technology can open up and cross borders. I think that the fact that we've moved online has meant that we've been able to open up our lectures. The peer lecture series, for example, that Noreen mentioned in her introduction, was broadcast both on YouTube and also live, and we had participation from multiple continents at different time zones. So I think there are some things we want to hold on to in terms of the possibilities to cross borders and cross cultures and to share knowledge. And the second thing I think that I wanted to really reflect on is that having worked for the last 20 years on the relationship between education, conflict and crisis, and worked in a lot of conflict-ridden places, my area of study has always been very much a minority sport. The concerns of small population groups in different parts of the world that are most affected. And this COVID crisis actually has brought home to the world what it means to be excluded from schools, what it means to have your education disrupted. These things that many countries in the North are experiencing now is something that has become the daily life of many parts of the world. And so hopefully the rest of the world won't forget all of those regions and countries whose daily struggle to provide education and access to education has been part of the history of their countries. So I think that hopefully there are some positive legacies of the COVID-19 pandemic for all of us to work on. What I'd like to do in this short presentation is to really do two things. First of all, to ask the question of what is political economy analysis and why does it matter? And secondly, to try to explore a little bit what it is that we're trying to do in the peer network and the peer open source learning platform that we are in the process of developing. So political economy of education and the field of research of political economy of education is really trying to understand the relationship between education policy and practice and broader social, economic, cultural, historical and political factors. It's trying to understand the relationship between education and the broader environment within which education operates. And this is not just a one-way process. It's not just that society affects education. Education also affects society. So we need to understand it in its multidimensional nature. Increasingly, across the international development community, national governments, there is a recognition, or there has been a recognition, that education policies and education reforms are not just failing because of the technical nature of education policies that are imperfect in some ways, but that the challenges of education policy are affected by the environment within which policies exist, resistance from different social forces, economic, environmental, geographical challenges, which rely on a broad understanding of the interaction between education, education policy, and the environment. And that's led to a range of research and a flourishing of research that has sought to understand education problems as embedded within complex local, national, and global political economy. And it's important to understand this multi-scalar nature of education, because often, particularly in the field of international development, there has been a tendency to look at the problems of education in a particular country as if they are contained within that, both generated inside that, and all of the issues are related to that. But when we open up questions of educational challenges, problems, inequalities, we realize that those inequalities are driven not only by internal factors, but also by regional and global factors. And we need to understand the common responsibility and the common role in resolving those issues. The political economy of education itself is a broad interdisciplinary field, ranging from narrow economistic understandings of political economy to much broader approaches that recognize economic, cultural, political, historical, and social dimensions, and also move between orthodox and more radical and critical approaches. So there is a broad array. And so I think that when we're talking about political economy, there are a few things that we want to say is that, first of all, it's very cognizant of issues around identity and class. So issues of gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, ability, disability, those dimensions. It's also very cognizant of interdisciplinarity, the intersections between sociology, education, international relations, political science, and also issues of geography. So identity, intersectionality, and geography are some of those. So it's a challenging, I think, interdisciplinary field where a range of factors need to be taken into account. And if I give you the example, again, returning to the issue of COVID-19, I think that what's happening with very narrow technical approaches to education is that we're looking at the nature of the effect of COVID-19 on learning loss. And we're focusing very much on curriculum loss and how much have children lost in terms of education delivery of the curriculum, and trying to find solutions to that, catch-up education, etc. That educationist approach would be challenged by a political economy approach that steps back and recognizes that education is not only about curriculum. What children have lost during this crisis is not only the certain pages in the maths, history, and English or language curriculum, but also a whole range of other things in terms of socio-emotional development, in terms of nutrition and food, in terms of access to health, in terms of social care and social protection. There are a whole range of dimensions that schooling embraces that we need to explore. And we also need to explore the differential ways that different students, families, communities have been affected by the COVID-19 crisis in very differential ways. If we take you back to the outbreak of the pandemic, there were a range of Hollywood stars that were infected with COVID-19, and in the newspapers they were saying, this COVID is totally socioeconomically and class blind. It affects everyone. But actually, 1.5 years down the line, we realized that COVID is very much reinforcing inequalities, geographical, socioeconomically, culturally, gender-wise, as it spreads across the planet. And these are the kind of questions that political economy approaches to education try to explore, try to understand. So where does the peer network fit into this? I think that the peer network is trying to provide a critique of contemporary international development in education research. And it's doing this in two ways. In the first sense, as I've already talked about, it's trying to demonstrate that there is a greater need for a more critical political economy analysis of education in context of conflict, crisis, and other challenges. It's trying to open up the field of education research to address those broader socioeconomic, cultural dimensions. The second contribution that peer network is trying to make is it's trying to say and recognizes that the field of research is dominated, as mentioned very eloquently earlier by the Dean of the Graduate School, that much of the research carried out by Northern-based institutions, Northern researchers with Northern paradigms and often research agendas. And that impoverishes. It's not to say that it's not making a contribution to knowledge and contribution to research, but this kind of monocultural and lack of diversity is challenging the possibilities of greater awareness and greater knowledge. We need to pluralize the field and open up to what Boaventura de Sousa Santos, the Portuguese philosopher, talks about, is an ecology of knowledge, and to a diversity of people. And the aim of the research project is really to provide that process of accompaniment, support to young researchers in Africa, in Central Asia, so that they can become a new generation that will bring new ideas that are culturally rooted, that are based in local knowledges and local ideas, so as we can address some of the great challenges of inequality and injustice that surround us. Now, how do we do this? We really have a dual strategy. The first is to try to commission a number of research projects led by local scholars in the regions. And the second is to provide an open source learning space to share, think, exchange, and develop new ideas in the political economy of education in conflict and crisis, to both support the commissioned research, but also the broader critical community. So we're trying to develop through the website, through the on-learning site, a resource that is free at the point of delivery, that is open to ideas, to diversity, to different areas that we offer to the community in the hope that we will gather people to join that. So this project is both calling for early career researchers to join us and to carry out research in their regions, but also to go on a learning journey with others to move forward, to try to find new and interesting approaches to challenging thematic areas within the field of education, conflict and crisis. So the peer learning site, which we in the University of Sussex have taken a leading role in, and my colleague Helen Murray has been putting a great deal of work in laying the foundations for this, is really trying to build the commons, building a free, open resource, accessible for all. It's currently a work very much in progress, not a finished product, and we hope that you will join us, provide lectures, give interviews, comment on the site so that we can develop this. And at the end of the 3 years of this research project, we hope that that will be an ongoing resource for the community. So I'm just going to click through now to what you would get if you click on the peer network website, which the address of which you can see on the top right hand corner, and then you will see a tab at the top for resources, and you click onto the peer network learning platform. When you click on that, you will actually be taken out of the website and into the University of Sussex online learning site, but it's not a paywalled, it's open access. Everybody can get into that immediately. And when you go into that, you'll see the following panels on the left-hand side. You'll see a panel that explores that gives you access to the peer learning module. You'll see a second tab, which is research tools for political economy analysis, which looks at research methodologies. In the third one, there's a selection of videos from around the world of different scholars giving lectures on different issues related to this area. And also we will develop that with a range of podcasts and interviews with prominent researchers working in this area. And then the fourth tab links to the two hubs in Africa and in Central Asia. So just moving on, I'm just going to take you to the peer learning module, just so that you can have a sense of what it is that we are offering. You'll see a page on the left which has a little bit of an explanation about the project, and then some of the aims of the learning modules that we're exploring, and then a range of thematic areas. So at the moment, we have 15 different topics, which hopefully, if you engage with them, will inspire you to reflect on different dimensions of the field of study that we're exploring. And I'll just show you module 1, which is the political economy of education in times of conflict, crisis, and pandemic, which is a general introduction to the field. And as you see on the right-hand side of this slide, in each of the thematic areas, we have a range of questions that seek to stimulate some of the debate around this area. Then we will offer a video or maybe a couple of videos that give some stimulus. We link then to some key publications, and we are working on translating several of these publications into Russian. Issues of language and diversity very important in this project. And then beneath that, on the reflection and discussion, we're posting a range of different materials. I seem to have lost the, sorry about that. We have a range of materials that we are suggesting, so suggested reading. So we're really trying to develop a database of information that is accessible and online and freely available. So just to conclude, I just want to read a section of a paper that I wrote some years back when we were conceptualizing some of this research and the ideas that we've taken forward with the peer network. Our world today is riddled with anger and grievances linked to feelings of injustice and inequality, whether perceived or real, economic, political, or cultural. Inequalities underpin many movements that have used violence to achieve their aims. Education systems can fuel these grievances, or they can reduce them. The state education system has as its representatives and its buildings in massive urban conurbations and rural hamlets. Its reach is unique, and through that reach can play a unifying and equalizing role in redressing the complex economic, cultural, political injustices that prevail outside and inside its doors. While education cannot resolve all the inequalities outside its gates, it does not have to merely reproduce them. Instead, it can act as a beacon of inclusion, equity, justice, and tolerance, and educate a new generation of citizens committed to social justice and solidarity, while simultaneously equipping them with the knowledge and skills necessary for employment success. For this to happen, we need to go beyond seeing children as human capital and instead see them holistically in their multiple economic, cultural, political, and social manifestations. So I think that hopefully that, you know, what I've provided with you is a sense of the kind of normative drivers of what we are interested to do in the project, and also those practical and technical and strategic mechanisms that we're trying to use in the peer network in order to facilitate the growth of a new generation of researchers and a new range of knowledge in this area. So, you know, the call then is for you to come and work with us to try to do this, both as researchers, as contributors to the new learning site. Think about putting an expression of interest in or encouraging your students and colleagues to do so. Engage with the peer learning site, suggest different ways that you could contribute to that, and join us in this process. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Noreen and for the rest of the session.
Thank you very much, Mario, for that great introduction to the political economy analysis of education, as well as taking us through the learning platform. Our fifth presenter is Professor Kelsey Shanks. Together with Mario, she is the joint PI of the peer network, and she's based currently at the University of Ulster. But she also has another responsibility. She is the Global Challenges Research Fund Challenge Leader for Education Research within UKRI. Kelsey's research explores the relationship between education and conflict in divided societies, with a particular focus on the role of education in post-conflict stabilization and peace-building agendas. Today, Kelsey will share with you further in what ways you can participate in the empirically funded research that Mario talked about, and she'll discuss different criteria and the process of putting an expression of interest. Thank you very much, Kelsey. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm unable to turn my video on. I'm not sure. Ah, there we go. Brilliant. I'm just going to share my screen. Has that worked? Yes, I think so. Thank you for the introduction. And I reiterate the thanks to the previous speakers and everyone involved in making this project possible. I'm really excited to be involved in it. And it's great to see so many people attending today and obviously interested in the topic. I'm going to just take, as Noreen said, the next 10 minutes to talk you through some of the more practical elements of applying to our expression of interest. As has been said already, the core objective of the peer network is to help develop a locally grounded and appropriate version of a political economy analysis of education. With this, with the aim of this in mind, to help national, regional and global level policymakers and practitioners make socially just decisions and investments in education. And one of the ways we want to do this is by commissioning this number of research studies through our regional hubs in Africa and here in Central Asia. And we hope that this is going to sort of facilitate more expertise and local sort of knowledge around these topics. So I'm just going to talk you through the overview of the call, and then we'll go through each level in a little bit more detail. So the expression of interest call is inviting applicants to apply for grants of up to £30,000 British pounds to look at projects that will apply the political economy analysis sort of framework to education. Shortlisted candidates will be invited to a specifically convened regional workshop where they'll be given support to develop their actual full proposals. Once the full proposals are submitted, they'll be subject to a further round of review and feedback before we make final decisions on the funding. Research must be led by organisations with a proven research capacity and preferably located in hub regions. The successful proposals will be expected to start in October 2021, and we anticipate funding around 10 research projects in each hub location. So let's just go into, I think Mario's very adequately covered the thematic focus and the framing, especially with regards to the political economy analysis. I'm just going to add in a little bit about how we define education in this call. So by education, we mean processes that facilitate learning, and that can be in a formal setting, such as schools or technical colleges, kindergartens or universities. But we're also looking at non-formal and informal learning activities that may be led by non-governmental organisations or social movements. So we define education in a very broad sense, and we're happy to receive expressions of interest that want to apply that broad definition. So what type of research are we looking for? Now, this has been touched on by the previous speakers and Shawnee in particular, because it's Gcrf funded. There are certain criteria we're looking for, but we also have criteria as a network that we want to apply. So we were keen to find research projects that contribute to enhancing the political economy analysis of education in conflict and crisis in the two regions. Projects that include very specific support or are led by early career researchers. Projects that are ethically informed, and by this we're looking at the inequalities in education that are based on social and economic status, gender, race, ethnicity, etc. Projects that are based on the principles of co-creation, so projects that bring together academic and non-academic stakeholders to tackle real-world problems. And as has been previously mentioned again, that projects that are based on interdisciplinarity and are inclusive of local and Indigenous knowledge. We're also looking for projects that recognise gender equality requires an approach that ensures that boys and girls, women and men, not only gain access to and complete education cycles, but are empowered equally in and through education. So who's eligible to apply? Applicants to the Central Asia Hub can propose research in one or more of the following countries. So in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. There are no restrictions on the location of applicant organisations. However, as the network has already been defined, we are strongly encouraging scholars from the Central Asia region to carry out the research, and therefore we strongly encourage academics either located in or from the region to apply. Applications should be made through a lead organisation with a proven research capacity. So this could be a university, a research institute, an NGO, or even a cultural organisation. To prove that they have research capacity, the lead organisation will need to meet a set of criteria if their application is successful. So not for the actual expression of interest, but for the next stage. So this criteria is assessed through a process that we refer to as due diligence, and it's kind of a risk assessment process. It's required by the funder of the peer network, so UKRI and Gcrf, and it ensures that we are managing the fund entrusted to us as the network in accordance with their terms and conditions. So to meet these criteria, applicants will have to provide some information about their organisation. As I said, this isn't required for the expression of interest stage, but it will be required if you're successful. So it's good to bear in mind how you create your team, who you're applying through at this stage anyway. So examples of the type of information that will be required are on the slide. They're also available on the application documents on the website, and I won't go through them in detail now. But like I said, it's just good to have in mind exactly the kind of criteria you'll have to adhere to if you actually come through. And what are the eligible costs? So for the expression of interest, we don't need a full budget. We just want a budget estimate. However, again, we would request that the guidelines for full proposal budgets are taken into consideration. These can be found again in the core document and online. I won't take you through them in the interest of time and not to bore you, but I will make a quick reference to one of the issues, which is the staff costs. So these grants are for researchers in the region, as we've reiterated throughout these presentations. If you would like to partner with someone from the Global North or from a UK university, you can only cost for their staff time if they're an early career researcher. So staff costs for established senior researchers in the Global North will not be eligible at this stage. But with that said, all of those different criteria, if you don't meet them, if you do not have an eligible organisation to apply through, or if you need assistance in finding collaborators and co-investigators, we want to help facilitate that. So you can send us an email and include a short description of your project and your skills and expertise, and we can help to hopefully facilitate some matchmaking for that process. Guidelines for submitting an expression of interest. So teams that are interested must complete the expression of interest in English. The application form can be downloaded from the website. It's a very simple Word document, and it requires a limit of, I think, 250 words for most of these sort of following topics. You'll have to cover the project investigators, so the co-Is and principal investigator. Project overview, which would include your main research question, aims and objectives. The political economy of focus, so there's a section for you to unpack how it adheres to everything Maria's just talked about and how you're applying that framing to your application. People and partnerships, so that goes back to what Shawnee was talking about, of ensuring that you're bringing in all the correct stakeholders and you're talking to people and it's not a really siloed kind of investigation. Your estimated budget, as we've just discussed. And then sort of proposals for project outcomes and dissemination, whether that be that this is a pilot project leading to a bigger grant to another funder, how will you disseminate the findings that you have from this project if it's a standalone project also. The completed expressions of interest must be submitted to our email address, which is info@peernetworkgcrf.org by 5 p.m. UK time on the 4th of May, 2021. Please submit it slightly earlier than the 5 p.m. because we know that there also can frequently be technical problems with uploads, etc. So if you take a bit of time. And then just on the website, just to finish, we have a couple of things just laid out more clearly, which will be the timeline, which tells you all the key relevant dates involved in this call and this expression and where that will then lead to. And also all the links that were mentioned previously to the resources that we have developed so far to help you with these applications. So I won't take up any more time, but happy to answer questions on any of the issues and any of the process that I've just explained.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. That was a very comprehensive explanation of the EOI process and criteria itself. And before I move on to our sixth panelist, ladies and gentlemen, please keep on writing questions for us in the chat box. And hopefully, we will soon be done with our talks, and then we can start discussing the issues that you are raising. So our sixth presenter is Professor Azim Badruddin. Azim is the director of the School of Education at the University of Cape Town. He is also the lead researcher and the leader of the Africa Hub. His research interests are in education policy sociology and the enactment of education policy within education and training practice, institutional provision, and in the workplace. Azim, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon all. As Norina said, my name is Azim. So good afternoon firstly, Mulweni from Africa, and Assalamu alaikum given my identity as a Muslim. On behalf of our Vice Chancellor at the University of Cape Town, Professor Mamokgethi Bakeng, and the Dean of our Faculty of Humanities at UCT, Professor Shosi Kelsey. And then on behalf of our Africa Hub team at UCT, Dr. Yunus Umar, who's my co-principal investigator, and our PhD students that work with us, Isha Dilraj, Jacques Pretorius, Cecile Sakafio, and Ashley Fasahi. I wish you all a very good afternoon and welcome you to this section of the launch looking at the African contribution. I firstly want to acknowledge the opportunities that are being made possible here as a result of the generous support of the Global Challenges Research Fund, and to note that this support is not just financial, because it allows us in Africa, in Cape Town, and then with partners of our African, in the various African countries, and members of the peer network Africa Hub, to conduct important research or start pilot research projects in ways that best suit the very different contexts where our researchers are meant to work. Colleagues, I know it sounds all very formal, but I'm going to go through this from the African perspective. I'd like to highlight some key factors tied to how we have approached this particular opportunity in dealing with the GCRF research monies. The first question, of course, that we asked ourselves when we were approached to be part of this partnership was, why are political economy of education analysis important for Africa? It was something that we had to grapple with very, very early on. Now, globally, of course, sub-Saharan Africa, sorry, colleagues, you all can see my screen. I'm just checking. Okay. Globally, sub-Saharan Africa contains the highest proportion of out-of-school children in some of the poorest conflict-affected areas in Africa. These include, just some examples: Ethiopia, Liberia, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, Uganda, Zimbabwe. And even though we are a medium-income country, South Africa suffers in equal ways in terms of having a two-nation environment where we have very rich and extremely poor in one country. Now, many of these countries receive significant investment of development assistance to education from Western donor countries, and also face significant challenges due to conflict in terms of internal displacement and refugee populations for whom the provision of education is a constant challenge. So, the African countries in our project, that are included in our project, share a range of conflict-related challenges to the educational systems. And we believe that by doing collaborative work amongst these different countries, will provide a range of comparative insights into the role of education in situations of conflict and protracted crisis. In Africa, many of you will know, but many, given the international context, many of you won't. Countries have gained independence at quite different times, and it's important to understand the historical moments that impact and inform how countries approach their education and their reforms in the education systems. However, each country continues to struggle with national conflicts of various kinds and forms. And I found that the transition to democratic governance systems and market economies have been enormously challenging. Market economies with a variety of political, economic, sociological, and cultural challenges. Similarly, in recent years, inclusive peace-building endeavors have been given greater attention to address the variety of conflicts that have flared up across our region and our continent. So collectively, the provision in Africa reveals a range of political economy challenges for education. To name but a few, these include inequitable distribution of resources, both educational and other, in different contexts. It highlights a challenge of how many African countries have adopted decentralization policies and have, in a sense, not only embraced privatization, but incentivized greater privatization in public education systems. Now, the different roles of education reforms in the midst of these conflict-related environments have challenged issues of governance and accountability. It's challenged teacher supply and deployment. It's challenged how we think about language and its role in the development of our national identities across the continent. And more importantly, it's challenged the way in which we've approached curriculum content. Sorry, I should be going to my, yeah, I'll leave it like that. So the potential for countries to recover from conflict is thus partly related to access to quality education for children and young people who will face the challenge of rebuilding conflict-affected societies. Our big challenge, especially in the COVID environment, is not only to think about the impact of COVID and in countries that are poor and that simply don't have the resources to accommodate the kinds of challenges provided by the COVID pandemic. But the bigger question is how we rebuild our countries and our societies post 2020, 2021, 2022. We don't actually know yet at what point we are going to get to actually start rebuilding our conflict societies. But we also have to remember that COVID is not the start of our problems. Our conflict have been built over a very long time. At different countries in various regions of the continent are challenged by quite different forms of conflict. So our argument in terms of how we approach the research in the Africa Hub is that political economy analysis of education policies and provision can lead to conflict-sensitive education, and that it will more likely do no harm and help contribute to conflict transformation in the continent and the region. This is consistent with the UN Secretary General's report on peace building and sustainable peace of April 2018, where they emphasize the importance of preventative approaches and the need to invest in basic services such as education to bring humanitarian and development agencies together to build effective and accountable institutions, to always protect human rights, to promote social cohesion and diversity, and to move to greater sustainable energy. So from our perspective, it's been very important to start thinking through how, as an Africa hub, we think through ways of engaging with a variety of challenges in the region, conceptually and practically. And part of our challenge in that regard is how to use a framework that was developed by Professor Mario Novelli and colleagues from 2016 onwards around the 4Rs framework. Now, of course, they build on the work of Nancy Fraser, the conceptual work of Nancy Fraser. But what we've tried to do what we are trying to do in our project is how not only to limit our analysis to the 4Rs framework, but to use it to open up and ask some crucial political economy analysis questions. The kinds of questions, of course, that we have to be asking is around things like the quantitative analysis of existing data that can help examine horizontal inequalities relevant to education inputs, resources, and outcomes in the different country contexts of Africa. To do an analysis of macro education reforms and policies in different countries, and to ask key questions around how decentralization, privatization, teacher education policies impact the very different groups in different contexts and affect their conflict and dynamics. For us, a crucial question when we approach the peer network in Africa is to ask key questions around how do we engage with redistribution. Because our concern is with equity and non-discrimination in education access, resources, and outcomes for the different groups in society, particularly the marginalized and disadvantaged. And as we know, the bulk of Africa falls in this category. We are also interested in asking key identity questions. How does identity influence education provision? What's the role of language language of instruction policies on conflict dynamics in various countries across the region, whether French speaking, Arab speaking, or English speaking? And then there are, of course, the other colonial languages that are embedded in the various contexts of our continent. How do we engage with the politicization of history and citizenship across the region? In Africa, we don't have a cohesive identity. We have multiple colonial identities and multiple country identities that have quite different relationships with their economies, with their peoples, and with the various communities that exist within particular countries. So how do we understand this politicization of history and citizenship? How do we understand cultural diversity and how it is presented in education systems, in the curricula, in textbooks, and in the way in which the power dynamics operate within different classrooms? And then how do we understand the influence of religious identity on education in each country context? So for us, it's important to be able to engage with issues of recognition. How do we recognize and how do we build recognition across different spaces? And then the last thing that we're very keen on exploring is how does participation in decision-making work around issues of allocation, use and distribution of resources at all levels of education systems? Who controls education in our various countries? To what extent does the state control education? And what is the role of non-state actors? So we're keen on understanding the issues of political control in different country contexts, and then ask what kinds of representation occurs within the administration of education that recognizes the various communities that operate in that space. So one of the main goals of our peer project in the Africa Hub is to have deep conversations about the legacies of conflict in the region and to discuss how to address these conflicts for new generations to understand within their respective communities. We ask key questions around how does education address historical and contemporary injustice that underpin conflict. We ask questions about how do debates on education contribute to approaches to development and capacities. And we ask questions about how do we reconcile at the political, at the economic, and at the social levels. How do we, and of course the educational levels, how do we reconcile communities and different countries in thinking about how to engage with issues of social justice as we move forward in a world more riddled today by conflict than in the pre-COVID period. I thank you.
Thanks, Azim. This was very informative, particularly for our audience who are largely from Central Asia. And Azim, if you can stop your screen share, then perhaps I can share mine. Thank you. So I'll just move to my very last slides. The African hub, as very eloquently been described by Azim, offers quite a contrast to Central Asia hub, and I won't go into the details, but some of the contrast we can see in the nation state formation, how all these nation states got independence at the same time, their historical, linguistic, and religious roots, as well as their geographical location in a landlocked country. How, you know, another contrast is the very highly accessible education systems in the region, alongside very different levels of fragility or instability in contrast to Africa. Nevertheless, the audience here, I'm sure, are aware of the many latent conflict drivers, of which one is inequalities. These need to be considered when thinking in terms of framing and proposing PEA research topics in the region. As Central Asian states are still very young, educational research in general is young, and PEA research in the region is very limited. So here, our Central Asian colleagues, organization, policymakers have a real chance to carve out a PEA agenda for the region, and we thank the Gcrf for enabling this opportunity for the research agenda to be emerged from the region. Earlier, the Dean of Education talked about educational reforms, and all these countries, all countries in Central Asia have initiated large-scale reforms in order to modernize their education system. In policy narratives, these reforms have usually been justified in terms of human capital development, in terms of their potential for economic growth. But a PEA-driven research would be interested in identifying the groups that are benefiting the least from these educational reforms, identifying the needs of those groups so that policymakers can better support them and the intended policy goals of the reforms can be realized. One of another way of looking at these reforms is that they were undertaken in partnership with donors or Western institutions. And PEA topic, for example, we in the Graduate School of Education today, immediately after this seminar finishes, we have an invited speaker, Olga Mann from the region, who is looking at epistemic injustices in internationalizing humanities and social sciences in higher education institutions in Kazakhstan. So there are a range of ways to look at these educational reforms so that we can propose more PEA-focused research rather than a more orthodox or technical kind of research project. Like South Africa, educational inequalities are an important consideration in our region as well. The success of Central Asian countries in making schooling widely accessible notwithstanding, emerging educational research indicates that educational inequalities are widening at the same time while national averages are going up. These inequalities are along the lines of geography, rural and urban location, language of instruction, and also elite schools versus mainstream schools. And they have far-reaching impact beyond schools, and they influence the opportunities in accessing prestigious higher education institutions in the region and beyond, as well as economic opportunities and broader social outcomes. It's not surprising given these are very new nation states. Nationalizing the curriculum is also a high priority. Elites, like elsewhere, often resort to education in building cohesive national imaginaries, rediscovering national identity. But it's important to remember that national identity is a double-edged sword. While it simultaneously can include and exclude. So a PEA-focused research would be interested in the extent to who is excluded from dominant narratives of national identity, who is excluded from the definitions of an authentic and legitimate citizen. Gender is often not mentioned in educational research, and it is important to acknowledge that if taken into isolation without intersection with other identity markers, we do not see gender as an important factor in learning outcomes in the region. Also, we don't see the kind of gender-based violence in and around schools and education that is reported elsewhere. And these are positive things. However, as Mario mentioned earlier, we need to see, to what extent education systems are actively playing a role in reproducing the power hierarchies that exist outside. And it's important to think about, with such high levels of literacy rates in the region and such equal access by and large for women, why is it that there are gender disparities at the expense of women, both in economy, in politics, in leadership positions, and looking at the practices, the contents, and the structure of education from a PEA lens would be interested in the extent to which education plays an active role to produce the existing gender order. In the region, there is a greater commitment towards including ethno-linguistic diversity of the learners. Again, a PEA lens would be interested in the extent to which these policies are effectively implemented so that all learners are taking advantage of education. So these are some potential topics. Again, we see patterns of migration both within the countries as well as across the countries, and particularly in border regions where different ethnic groups live in very interdependent network of communities. To what extent ethnic minorities or migrant children are included in education system, or to what extent are they excluded? And there can be other useful PEA topics coming from researchers within the region, and I look forward to the chat question later. So just to say again, how can you get involved? A number of ways that you can get involved in the hub activities. You can participate in the online platform led by Sussex. We plan to start a reading group for Central Asia with our, the linguistic context that we work in. You can propose suitable papers for the reading group and participate in the reading group. Take initiative in putting an expression of interest, and if you need our help, let us know. We can put you in touch with relevant partners. And for the hub, if you are doing PEA focused research, or your research can lend itself to PEA, let us know and let's interview you. Let us make a video, you talking about your research for the peer network, so that our community can grow. And we are also putting together with my co-leader, Dr. Ellen Thibault, we are putting together a list of regional seminars, inviting scholars from Central Asia or those who are living abroad, but focus on Central Asia. And I'm delighted to see one of them in the participant list as well. So please let us know, get in touch with us and let us know who would you like to see in those regional seminars. And put us in touch with researchers, activists, and policymakers in the region. You can also subscribe to our events through the peer network. So thank you very much. I'll stop here, and thanks a lot for listening patiently to us for a very long time. We now open the floor for questions and answers. So Vanessa and Almira, can you please send us the list of questions that our participants have been raising?
Okay, so thank you. I just sent you the questions posed in English.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. I will see if I have, okay, so Vanessa's questions have arrived. And I will ask my fellow colleagues to help me in answering some of those questions. But the first one of the questions is on our rationale for the regional focus, the countries of focus. And it's from Jane Sagan. And it's, and they are asking, Central Asia has a very wider interpretation. Why have we excluded Pakistan and Afghanistan from the list of Central Asian countries? And I agree totally with you, Jane, that it has a wider interpretation. As I explained, we started this journey in February 2019, and originally we included Pakistan and Afghanistan in the list of countries alongside other Central Asian countries. And we were critiqued by the reviewers. We had to go through several rounds of selection process. And one of the critique was that how will we accommodate these very diverse languages? Because the Central Asia, as we have defined and described, at least Russian is a language that is widely understood and spoken in the region, whereas in Pakistan has different languages, Afghanistan has different languages. I am myself from Pakistan, and I am a Pashtun speaker, so by ethnicity, I'm Afghan. And I would have liked to have Pakistan and Afghanistan included, but there is another reason as well. Both Pakistan and Afghanistan have been funded by the United Kingdom and is well represented in the region, whereas Central Asian countries have not gained that prominence, at least from UK funders. So I think that is my rationale. The question was posed to Mario. Mario, have I explained the question well, or would you like to add something else?
No, I agree.
Another question is about the thematic focus, and one is about water limitation. So in this region, the scarcity of resources and how conflicts erupt over scarcity of resources. And water is mentioned here. Young people are often involved in these conflicts. Water resource training support are critical to set up properly for the childhood, which we are missing in many areas. Does your program include the water-related thematics area? So, you know, as we said earlier, it's for these themes have to take into account the unique context and needs of the region. And if conflict resolution over scarce resources, including water, is important in the curriculum to develop skills in terms of how to use these scarce resources in ethical and equitable manner, then why not? I don't see any problem with that. Kelsey, would you like to add something to that question?
I think you answered it very well, but I agree. I think it depends on the specifics and how it's applied. I think it can be relevant, and it'll depend how it's written up.
Exactly. So as long as you can justify and give it, link it to a PEA lens, then why not? Olga Mann, who is also our invited speaker later at 6 p.m., she has a question, and it is about level of education, primary, secondary, any level of education, as Kelsey highlighted in her expression of interest. And even we are considering education in a very broad way, so not just state-sponsored education. Any kind of informal education, whether it's provided by community organizations or other organizations. Olga has another question, and that is about theoretical methodological projects, or are we focusing only on empirical projects? Kelsey, can you help me here, please?
Sorry. Well, I would have deferred that one to you, actually, Noreen, and what you would prefer to see. My instinct would have been empirical, but if it's a theoretical focus you would be interested in the region.
I too would prefer, even if it's heavily focused on theory, for the theory to be coming out of empirical data. I think that would also be my preference. Then there is no one related to peer network from Muhammad Kabir. I have a question according to education reforms and quality assurance process in Kazakhstan. What kind of high educational reforms implemented in Kazakhstan for the last 20 years? Give me some important information of the quality assurance process. Is Aydah present here? Is she still with us? Dr. Aydah Sagan Taiwa. But yes, you know, I can inform you, Aydah is here and she knows the ins and outs of these reforms. But basically, you know, since 2007, Kazakhstan has updated its curriculum in a rolled out fashion. It was trialed out in a small number of well-funded schools, and then they supported teachers based on their experience. These curriculum, pedagogic, as well as assessment reforms have been rolled out now to mainstream schools with ongoing support, with ongoing research. And some of that research has been funded by Nazarbayev University, and some of our international partners have undertaken that research. But Professor Sagan Taiwa is more qualified than I am, so I'll give her a chance to explain to you.
I think it's a very
Thanks, Aydah.
It's a very big topic, and it's very difficult to answer in the frame of one seminar, and especially introductory seminar. Just if it's possible, Professor Durrani, if we can have a special meeting with the participants where we can make a brief presentation on the educational reforms in Kazakhstan, because there were several stages of reforms at all levels, at the higher education level. And when we say about the economic analysis, there are a bunch of investigations on this topic and how it has impact on the educational development. One of the latest projects where I'm involved with the World Bank is about the equity and equality. And it's not only about the economical development of the country, but we do understand the root of all big changes about the national development is education. But if we come to the very brief answer on the educational reforms, the higher education is not all about the curriculum development and the innovations, but it's also about the governance. We are coming to the, we are introducing now the shared governance, faculty governance principle, the shared governance with the introduction of the board of directors, using some principles of election of rectors and the appointment of vice rectors. It's about autonomy. It's a big movement towards autonomy in higher education, so academic freedom, as well as the HR autonomy, organizational autonomy. For school education, we have to say about the development of rural schools, mainstream schools, as well as the big NIS, it's Nazarbayev Intellectual School, that was built as the flagship for development of the secondary education. At the preschool education, we say about the mandatory, about the public-private partnership in preschool education, early childhood education. Just big reforms on inclusive education in the country at all levels. And one of the questions here was about the TVET, and I want to say that maybe TVET educational reforms are not very strong in Kazakhstan compared to Uzbekistan, but there are definite steps for improvement, and it's again some just, there was a big decision on making the first degree, TVET degree, for free for all Kazakh citizens. So again, I would like to say it's a very big topic, and if the host and his partners allow us, we can organize a special session on educational reform in Kazakhstan for all participants of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aydah, for that detailed response. Vanessa has sent us some more questions, and while I look at those questions, there was a question from Ellen DeYoung, and it was to me and Mario, and it was about, there is, Ellen DeYoung is raising our attention to a range of actors who are already involved in some kind of similar work, and he has referenced Soros Foundation, the World Bank, and Asian Development Bank, and he has asked us whether we consider our work as an oppositional to them, or we will be accepting that kind of work. So I'll let Mario explain that answer, but I think the answer was in the presentation itself when he described the ways PEA approaches are very widely different and what kind of PEA approach we have in mind. Mario?
Yes, thank you very much. An excellent question. I think that in the process of organizing this launch, we have tried to reach out to a range of organizations and institutions, some of whose are present. So we're very much open to engaging with a range of different institutions that are already engaged in political economy research, that are interested in education. I think that the two important things for this project is that one, the aim is to, in both the Africa hub and in the Central Asia hub, is to really support scholars from the region and to facilitate their connections with other scholars in the region, to build their international networks and to support their intellectual development. So at the heart of it, we have that principle. And the second is that we are open to an understanding of education that is broad. So I think that, you know, for us, the key is that the process is as important as the product. It's not to say the product is not important, but that we're not trying to do research in a narrow area where at the end of the project we put all those and we have a specific answer to a very focused question. We're open to the variety of issues that are emerged, and we'll select on that basis. We're looking for a variety of participants from around the regions, and we are looking to engagement with a range of institutions. That doesn't necessarily mean that we will agree with all of these organizations, and you know, what we aim to do is to create a vibrant environment for engagement with different ideas, to challenge perceptions, both ours and yours, and to work together through that process. So we really do encourage applications from different institutions, individuals, and we recognize that, and I've noticed in the chat box some queries about, you know, whether £30,000 is enough to do this research. So, of course, this is a small amount of funding. It's in, if you like, kind of seed funding. These are kind of pilot projects, but hopefully the commissioning of these small pilot projects will become much more bigger than, you know, there will be a sum of those parts that will become much more bigger than those individual projects and lead to new interactions, new projects, new research ideas.
Thanks, Mario. And it's also to remind our attendees that we have a bit more money to enhance the impact of these projects. And although the amount is small, the time scale is also short. Kelsey can correct me, but it's, I think they have to use this money in a year's time. Is that right, Kelsey?
We set a year project timeline, yeah. The application.
So it's only a 1 year's project. There is some additional money once the project has been completed. We have a small pot of money to boost further so that teams can work further on the impact of their projects. We have another question in the chat box from Irina, who has been the Deputy Minister of Education in Georgia. She is asking if individual experts working outside the Central Asia or Africa or research institutions might be engaged in the work of the network. So I think, again, invite Kelsey to answer that.
I think ultimately, although we have our 2 hub regions, we're really interested in engaging globally and extending the network on political economy analysis more generally. In terms of the call for research, we are more limited to where we're looking for research, but in general engagement with the peer network, we definitely welcome people from countries outside of hub locations.
Thanks,
Mary,
Kelsey.
do you want to add to that? Sorry.
Thank you. There is another question about, there are so many questions related to the expression of interest, and that's good because, you know, I see potential interest there. Another question is about restrictions on nationality in terms of submitting proposals. Is there any restrictions on nationality?
No, I don't think we don't have nationality restrictions. What we have said is obviously the organisation that will be bidding. So the organisations have to be located either in the hub region or linked to in some way. I don't think it's a specific nationality issue. We won't fund in the global north. We won't fund senior researchers, regardless of their nationality. It's just their location if they already have an established career in the global north and university. As we've said, the budget is quite small, and we think that would be kind of counterproductive.
And again, going back to the issue of funding, in terms of our commitment to keeping the money in the region and giving a greater chance to early career researchers from the region to utilize that funding, one of the reasons why the budget is short, and it's because of the UKRI regulations. If the budget is more than 30,000 British pounds, then it has to be led by a UK-based PI, and then it means more money goes out of the region rather than being spent here. And that's why, as a team, we decided that it's okay, 30,000 pounds for 1 year, small-scale, locally ground study is okay. There is another question on Tibet, so it's a thematic question, whether we are considering technical and vocational education and training, which is missing in Central Asian areas, and it has links to gender, because women are missing the Tibet support in Central Asia. So does the Tibet-related thematic area is included in our program? So as we mentioned earlier, as it would appear as a topic of interest, but as long as you can utilize a PEA lens and make a convincing argument, then it should be fine. Would that be an issue in your region as well, Azim, the links between Tibet and gender?
Firstly, Noreen, the whole Tibet sector itself is a political economy question worldwide. It lies at the center of all debates about the future of education. And so certainly in South Africa and in the African region, Tibet is a huge debate. Then with regard to issues of gender, absolutely. It's tied to the masculine identity, is tied to work itself and the nature of work. And so who teaches in Tibet colleges then become a crucial issue. So those are fundamental questions that absolutely have to be engaged in all kinds of education work in this area at the moment.
Thank you, Azim. I just wanted to build further on that. Two of my colleagues recently have produced a paper on STEM subjects and gender in the context of Kazakhstan. And in this context, in Kazakhstan, we don't see any disparities along gender lines in terms of learning outcomes. Kazakhstani girls perform better than boys in science and reading on standardized international tests, and do as well as boys in mathematics. Nevertheless, they tend to be concentrated in feminized disciplines, which then lead to feminized occupations with low income. So their study included interview questions with STEM graduates in Kazakhstan, and apparently both male and female teachers in schools discouraged them from studying STEM because STEM was seen as not an ideal discipline or subject. So the issue, what I'm saying is that the issue of Tibet is beyond Tibet. What teachers think is an ideal occupation for girl and an ideal occupation for boys also matters at the level of schooling. So teachers discouraging girls not to study STEM subjects, even they were very good students, simply because it will spoil their marriageability. And these contextual matters are important, and these themes are important. So thanks for raising that question. Another question is about, does your program include education for farmers on different themes? So my answer would be that we are not like doing development kind of research, but I'll let Kelsey explain what she thinks.
Yeah, I think in terms of what's eligible in terms of questions and thematics, one of the fundamentals of the Gcrf pot of money is that it's locally defined. So that we as a peer network have deliberately left the call very open and provided you with the resources to understand political economy analysis through the learning platform, so that you can tell us what needs to be researched rather than us tell you what needs to be researched. And I think that's a really important point. There'll be lots of questions in the chat about, is this an eligible topic? If it refers to learning and it refers to sort of, and you could apply the political economy lens, then I think it would be relevant. And it's, I suppose it's up to applicants to make that case to us once they've sort of engaged with the resources we're providing, and to convince us that that's the case.
Absolutely, Kelsey. Thank you very much. And I'm really glad that our attendees are asking us important questions, clarifying what is eligible and what is not. So there are some more questions in the red. One is, I want to do a competitive research about the higher education reforms of Afghanistan and Kazakhstan. So please, if possible, share me main resources according to this topic. So it's a comparative study of Afghanistan and Kazakhstan. So one of the things is that the empirical study focus has to be on the 4 Central Asian countries that Kelsey mentioned in her talk. And please contact us and we can help you with the kind of materials that you are looking for. Just to say, currently Almira is just summing up a scoping study on conflict drivers in the region, and once it's completed in English, we will be translating it in Russian as well, and it will be available, both versions will be available from our website, so that will also be a useful resource for potential bidders and potential teams. When I don't have any more questions in English. Almira, do you have any questions in Russian that you would like to translate?
We have questions only in English language, so in Russian we don't have.
Okay.
But I have written that if any questions, I can translate it into English language.
Okay, fantastic. Because we have another fantastic talk starting at 6 p.m. by Olga Mann on a PEA-related topic, I would offer vote of thanks and then would like to conclude the topic, the event. And I have several important people to thank. First of all, I'm very thankful to the provost, Professor Adesida, and our dean, Professor Aydah Sagan Taiwa, both for their time and participation, but also the enormous support that they have offered us in making this event possible. In addition to UKRI, whose funding enabled this opportunity, and I personally think it is a very unique opportunity for Central Asian researchers, rather than being driven by donors' agenda, to come up and develop research projects that are locally grounded and are relevant to them. And a lot of research talks about this, as Aydah very eloquently described in the beginning, that, you know, particularly in gender, Northern researchers studying gender relations in Central Asia, and at best they are partial, if not misleading. So it's your opportunity to carve out this research agenda. I'm particularly thankful to UNICEF country offices and region office who have given us our time, have put us in touch with different organizations, fantastic researchers in the region. I'm also thankful to British Council offices in the region and in the country, and UNICEF country offices in widely disseminating this event, as well as participating in this event. And I have now to show you a slide of people who have been working creatively and at very odd times. Their labor has made this event possible. Dr. Ellen Thibault, who is the co-leader of the Central Asian Hub, my colleague Zakir Jumkalov, the director of the Research Institute based in the Graduate School of Education, Almira Tabaeva, Peer Network Research Assistant, Tan Cholpan Mukhidinowa, GSE Graduate School of Education Marketing Manager, Vanessa Ozawa, PhD student and graduate research assistant in the Peer Network. And last of all, enormous appreciation and thanks to our international collaborators who have been working with us for months together to arrange this event, which I hope will open new opportunities for Central Asian researchers. Before I conclude formally the event, if any of our panelists would like to say anything, the floor is yours. Okay.
Just a big thank you to you. Thank you very much. It was a great session, and look forward to some excellent proposals and to several years of collaboration.
And you know, our project manager at Ulster has sent us an email today that she wants us to meet again on Wednesday. So we will be on the network. It's not just the end of, it's just the beginning, not the end. Thank you very much, panelists, and thank you very much all attendees for the very long presence here. Please join us, the talk of Olga Mann. If anyone has the link, if they can put in the chat, otherwise go to GSE website and the event will be publicized there as well. Olga Mann is a promising researcher from the region. She is speaking on a fantastic topic, which is very much linked to PEA, and join us there. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening or whatever time there is. And I'll see my team on Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for attending, everybody.